Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. We'll give people just 1 minute here to uh, log on, and then we will get started. Thank you all for being here today. Looks like we've kind of leveled out for attendance, so we'll go ahead and get started. Again, thank you for joining today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ryan Ingwerson. I'm in the water power section of the comms office. I'm also the lead of the web conferencing working group. A little bit background on me, I started getting involved in webinars largely due to COVID. The office was in need of people kind of brought up to speed and familiar with web events, and so I started hosting these events, and now I am the largest Zoom user for sure within the comms office. I think I'm one of the top Zoom users at NREL as a whole. So a lot of familiarity with these platforms and hoping to help you all out with any future digital events you have. So getting into it, what we'll talk about today, we'll do a little overview of uh, what digital events can bring to your projects, why they're useful. We'll go over the event platforms that are available to us as an office. We'll start by going over briefly Teams and WebEx. Most of the meeting today we'll talk about Zoom, as that is the most preferred platform for our office. Then we'll do a little quick Q&A on the technical side, and then move into some project management and other event tips. And then we'll end with some more questions. I will highlight this is going to be more of a high-level overview. We aren't going to take the time to do demos or actually go in and explore the platforms. So if you are interested in that, please reach out to me and I can schedule a time to do that with you. But at least for now, we're just going to keep this pretty high level. So why digital events? First, they are an equitable, accessible format for outreach. In-person events cost money for travel, lodging, so on and so forth. For digital events, all you need is an internet connection. And so especially for communities that may not have the funds for travel or the time or energy to invest that degree of effort, webinars and digital events are a great way to reach those audiences. They're relatively low cost. The cost of putting a webinar itself is really just the time it takes to run the webinar. Most of the cost for these goes into promotional efforts, and those can be managed very reasonably. Digital events are very flexible. You can do a number of formats, from quick informational webinars to multi-day workshops. Really, any meeting format you want to do, digital events can accommodate. Um, with them being digital and with them needing all you need is an internet connection, you can reach audiences internationally even. So you aren't confined to a specific geographic area. And you can also increase audience engagement by reaching larger audiences. You can get more voices in the room and get more feedback from whoever you are engaging. So the platforms we have available to us, there's three larger groups: Teams, Zoom, and Cisco WebEx. Teams, pretty much everyone here is familiar with. You're on it now. It's the best option for internal use. Teams is really designed for team collaboration. It's meant that's its primary purpose. It can be used for external events, but we prefer Zoom for external events. Teams itself, a Teams meeting can host up to 250 participants. There is an option, it's called Microsoft Live Events. We've called it Teams Live. That can host up to 10,000 participants, and that's a good option for just large one-way kind of information dumps, pardon me. Zoom, like I mentioned, that's our preferred option, especially for external use. We'll get into more of why in a little bit. But participant limits for both Zoom meetings and Zoom webinars depends on the account level that you have. The basic account for Zoom meetings allows up to 500 participants. For Zoom webinars, it's 100. And then WebEx is another option available to us. That is an option you can use for external events for clients who don't have Zoom or maybe have technical issues with Zoom. And the base account on that allows up to 1,000 participants. So going a little bit into Microsoft Teams, again, best option for internal events and meetings. It features recording. This is being recorded right now. You can do breakout session. It's great for file sharing and collaboration. It's great for informal interactions, emojis, reactions, GIFs. My team is well known for our GIF conversations. But so it has more options for some fun engagement like that. And then, like I mentioned, Teams Live for large one-way webinars. Consequences or some negative things about Teams, there's not the option for alternate hosts or scheduling privileges, meaning whoever schedules the Teams meeting, they are the one largely responsible for how it runs and what you can do within that Teams meeting. There's not the option to assign that to someone else or give other people privileges. We have noticed a lack of accessibility in Teams for external audiences, and that kind of depends on where they're coming from. I've seen some people have difficulties accessing chat. Sometimes people just show up as guests and I don't know who they are or where they're from. And it also has a smaller capacity, only 250 people. So it's not great for any webinars where you are expecting a larger audience. For WebEx, again, it's an option for external events. It does feature on paper very similar if not identical features to Zoom. It offers recording, breakout sessions, customizable registration pages. One thing WebEx does have that Zoom does not is in WebEx, you can upload a presentation or files into the meeting or platform itself. And then that makes the presentation available to all panelists. So you aren't necessarily relying on one panelist to have the presentation and screen share. You can make the presentation part of the meeting. So the reason we don't suggest WebEx as much as Zoom is it's generally not as intuitive as an interface. For WebEx, I find myself having to spend more time talking people through how to actually use the interface, where to find certain features. I just have to spend more time teaching people about WebEx. On the back end, especially finding the post-event reports, it's not as well organized. It's not as clear and easy to navigate as it is in Zoom. So it just takes more time and you have to spend more time getting familiar with the back end to grab those reports. And we have noticed in the past that bandwidth support is not as good as Zoom. For Zoom, you generally have pretty reliable connection, especially with multiple videos running at the same time. If you in WebEx, we have noticed that there are some issues with bandwidth support, especially if you have a lot of people on camera at once. So Zoom, again, best option for external events and meetings. We find it the most stable, as I just mentioned, intuitive, easy to use, and largely because it's very, very commonly used in the public. Most people have been on Zoom calls or on Zoom calls regularly. They're familiar with it. So there's not a whole lot usually I find that needs to be done on teaching people how to use the interface. Most people are pretty familiar with it. And it is easily our most commonly used platform for external facing webinars. Downsides, licenses are expensive. I don't know the exact amount, but they are significantly more expensive than WebEx licenses. So especially if you do require or if you have an event that requires more than the base level, so for Zoom webinars, more than 100 attendees, we recommend looking within the office for someone who already has a Zoom account to run that, just because it's not worth spending the money on the account for just one meeting. And then for some clients, it's not available. I do have one client who I use WebEx for, and they weren't given specific guidance that they couldn't use Zoom, but their management went in and just removed Zoom from all of their computers. So for them, I do use WebEx, but otherwise I use Zoom for pretty much every external facing webinar. So for the rest of the time, we're going to go over some more features of Zoom specifically. Within Zoom, there are two formats. There's Zoom meetings and Zoom webinars. And the easiest way to think of it is Zoom meetings is basically Zoom's version of a Teams meeting like we're on now. It has the options for breakout sessions. It has limited roles, so it just has host and attendees. So there's not options for different privilege levels or things like that. Again, you have a 500 person limit by default that can be added if you pay for an additional license. And it's best for interactive sessions. So especially if you want people to be able to openly come off mic or turn on their videos and have a lot of networking and engagement, Zoom meetings is great. But the settings in there can be made so that it works well for large public webinars as well. You can spotlight certain features or speakers. You can do a number of things to help make the meetings a good platform for informational webinars as well. Zoom webinars does not have the option to do breakout sessions. So if you want breakout sessions, you will need to schedule in Zoom meetings. And it does have more roles. So you can designate host, panelist, and attendees. And for each, you have different privilege levels. So the host can do more than panelists can, and panelists can do more than attendees can. Zoom webinars is the most common we use for informational webinars, mainly because you want your speakers to be able to come off video or come off mute whenever they need to, but you don't necessarily want everyone in attendance to be able to do so as well. So those are the differences between the two platforms. Go over some features of Zoom here. Record to cloud. That is a wonderful feature. The great thing about that is that means it records to a cloud account, not to a local computer, which means if you as a host are recording and you lose connection or your computer restarts or your power goes out, as long as there is a panelist still on the webinar, the recording will continue. The recording will not stop. So recording to cloud means no matter what happens on your end as host, the recording will continue to capture everything. Breakout rooms in Zoom meetings only. Again, you can do breakout room pre-assign. You do this by email. So if you have an event where you want to manually assign people to a breakout room, specifically if you want people to choose which breakout room they're in, by email, you can set those breakout rooms before the event. You can also randomly assign them. And the most common way to do this is you just create however rooms you want and then tell Zoom to evenly break out the attendees into those rooms. There's also the option to allow people to move freely between the rooms. The setting in Zoom that says that allows this, I think the wording specifically says allow people to return to the main room. But that's great for networking. So if you want to have an opportunity for attendees to go from room to room to talk to different people, get different feedback or experiences, allowing that option is a great way to host events like that. I will also note breakout rooms can be recorded. This must be done locally, which means to someone's computer. And in order to do that, you do need to designate someone in each room who will be the one to record and manually give them permissions. That's just in the main room. You find their name in the participant list. You click on the three dots next to their name and say allow to record. I will say that because that is a local recording going to that person's computer, if they lose connection or if something happens on their end, the recording will stop. So if you are going to record breakout sessions and you give someone those privileges, just make sure that it is someone with a very stable and secure internet connection. Yeah, Q&A and chat boxes are pretty straightforward. One thing I will mention that I have come in contact or I have had experience with recently is anonymity. I have had to run some events where all the attendees are competing for funding and they don't want the attendees to know who they are competing with. So a couple things I've learned in this is you want to change the chat settings so that the attendees can only chat with the hosts and panelists. This means that when they type something into chat box, their name will not appear to other attendees, but it will appear to hosts and panelists. Also, do not in any form mark a question as answered in the Q&A box. So in the Zoom Q&A box, by default, it will reveal the questioner if you mark it as answered, and that means either typing in an answer to the question or marking the question as answered live. So if anonymity is required, just keep track of which questions you've addressed, and our advice is just don't press any buttons. Otherwise, it will reveal who the questioner is, and I actually did have that happen on a webinar recently, so I know that from experience. And then by default on Zoom webinars, attendees cannot see each other. There is the option that they can see the number of other attendees, but by default, the participant list is hidden from the attendees. Also within Zoom, there's the options for polling, surveys, and quizzes. I did log on to Zoom this week, and it looks like they just boosted their survey capabilities. I haven't explored that yet. I'm curious to see what that looks like and explore that. But Zoom does have integrated polling. It is great for just quick, how did you feel about this webinar type question things. If you are considering extending polling, so let's say you want to do upvote or downvote on a Q&A, you want to do a geographical map, word bubbles, anything like that, we do have a poll everywhere account, and I love poll everywhere for polling personally. Anytime I get a client who wants to do polling within a webinar, I actually recommend that they use poll everywhere. And poll everywhere is not included in this training, but if anyone is curious about poll everywhere, please let me know and we can set up a time to go over that as well. I will also note, and this is a question I get a lot, in breakout rooms, there is not the polling feature. Polling can only be done within the main room of the meeting. So what I always recommend if someone wants to do polling within a breakout room is you really just ask a question, have people type their answer into the chat. That's the easiest way to do polling in a breakout room. Some other features, whiteboarding, so collaborative kind of thought process sessions, practice sessions in waiting rooms. So you can set up a pre-event room that is closed off to attendees that you can do final tech check, talk through, run a show, and then you can close the practice session and go, or the waiting room, and start the webinar without having to change the link or send an alternate meeting invite. It's all the same invite, same links. It's just opening and closing that practice session. Zoom also has co-host and alternative host role assignments, which again, Teams does not, WebEx does. One other feature that is actually pretty cool is you can set speaker and panelist virtual backgrounds. So I actually see this a lot with prize webinars where they're trying, especially informational webinars where they're introducing a new prize a lot of times as kind of like a unified visual presentation. You want your speakers to have the same virtual background, and I've been on a number of times where one or two speakers are having troubles finding the image, and you have to talk them through how to change their background in Zoom and all that. As the Zoom host, you can do that on the back end. You can add an image as the virtual background and apply it to all panelists. So when a panelist joins the meeting and turns on their camera, that background will automatically be applied to them. Zoom does also have customizable registration pages, so you can change, you can add images or banners, you can change the color scheme, you can do a number of things with it. If you do need to add custom registration questions, I do just recommend checking PII requirements and seeing if a PII assessment is needed. There are fields that are already pre-approved for webinars. Those are listed here: name, phone, address, email, organization, university, title, and job role. So if any combination of those are what you're asking on your registration page, you do not need a PIA assessment or separate PIA approval. But if you are asking anything beyond those fields that might identify the attendee, you please check with your web specialist, and they can help you initiate a PIA assessment and make sure your registration questions are good to go. There's more information about PII and those assessments at that link. And again, I will be posting these links in the chat afterwards so that you have easy access to them. One of my favorite features of Zoom, if not my favorite, is what's called scheduling permissions. And what this allows you to do is schedule an event on someone else's account or allow someone else to schedule on yours. This is great for managing conflicting requests, and I even used this recently. Yesterday, I had requests for 2 webinars that ran at the same time as the office holiday party. And by using these scheduling permissions, I was still able to PM those webinars. So I was able to create the registration page, provide registration info, all that, but with the webinar on someone else's account. It's also great for out of office. So if you have a webinar coming out or coming up and you're going to be out of office, but you expect the client will want to have registration numbers or maybe make changes to the registration page or the event itself, you can you can designate someone as your out of office contact for that webinar, someone who has a Zoom account, and you can move the event to their account just during the time you're out of the office. So that way, if any changes need to be made, that person can go in and make the changes. This is a feature that is only available in Zoom that's available to us. It's not available in Teams or WebEx. So that's one of the reasons I really, really love Zoom, one of my favorites. And to set it up, it's really simple. In the web settings of your Zoom account, you just go to Other, and it's, I think the last setting on the page, it says Scheduling Privilege, and you just enter the email of the person that you want to give privileges to, and it's done. I will say when scheduling privilege, it does need to be someone who already has a Zoom account. You can't just do some random person in the office. It does need to be someone who has an existing Zoom account. Post-event reports that Zoom provides, chat and Q&A transcripts, video and audio recordings, attendance reports, registration reports, and then poll survey and quiz results. WebEx provides these as well. One thing I like about Zoom, that especially their post-event registration reports, is Zoom will automatically track which of the registrants actually attended the webinar. So when you go into the event afterwards and you publish the registration report, there's the option to sort the list by attendee status or attended status. So you can see right off the bat how many registrants you had, how many attendees you had, and which of your registrants did not attend. Some general housekeeping things that we highlight or include in every webinar that we run on Zoom. The first and most common is options for audio. A majority of people will join by using their computer audio. So our suggestion for pretty much every webinar is if you are having audio issues, just switch your audio to phone. All these webinars also have dial-in numbers as well in case your computer starts acting up. So that's something we include on all housekeeping slides. We like to remind panelists, this is not necessarily on the housekeeping slide, but just a general to-do. For bandwidth concerns and conserving bandwidth, we remind our panelists to mute their audio device and turn off video when not presenting. It can also just avoid some awkward situations, like a panelist, I think I've had a couple times where they forget to turn off their video or audio, and then they're shuffling around or sneezing or coughing in the background while someone else is trying to speak. So just a reminder to them. You always want to let people know that the webinar is being recorded, and just advise them on where they should submit their questions. Usually we direct them to the Q&A button, but you can advise them to do Q&A and or chat. I always recommend keeping an eye on both just in case someone doesn't pull up the chat box or doesn't know how to find one. It's good to just keep an eye on both. And some other things, if anyone's having troubles with the webinar, as I mentioned, audio, try switching to phone. If you have any other issues with the presentation, you can message the Zoom host directly, or you can contact Zoom support if it seems to be a more technical Zoom issue. And then again, you always want to let people know that if a webinar is being recorded, and you want to let them know if and where and when a recording of the webinar will be available and where they can find that. So that is, I know I just did a big dump of a lot of information on kind of the technical aspects of the platforms in Zoom. Before we move on to kind of the project management side of things, are there any questions on the technical features of these platforms? Not seeing any. Very cool. So we'll move on to some project management for digital events. The first step for any digital event is scheduling a kickoff meeting with your client to talk through them. Before you even set up the event, you'll want to talk to them about a title of your webinar. We recommend keeping the title as short as possible, 10 words or less. And I know that gets hard with very technical subjects, but especially when you're looking at character limits on promotional campaigns, especially social media, you don't want a title that's going to sound really technical or long. It's just going to turn people off from attending. You want to obviously confirm date and time and whether registration is required. For a majority of our webinars, especially for post-event communications and knowing who did or didn't attend, we enable registration on almost all webinars. I think the only ones I have been on that didn't are really just very open networking things where they just wanted anyone who had time to hop in and join, and they didn't really necessarily care tracking who joined. But again, those kind of events are rare in my experience. And then once you have the registration or the event details confirmed and you're building the registration link before sharing publicly, you'll want to make sure you have all your registration fields confirmed, that you've added any branding images such as a banner or a graphic to the registration page, and then a webinar description and summary. And the next slide, I want to talk about a bit more detail on descriptions or summaries, because I've seen a lot of these that aren't good, and I've learned a lot about how you can use these to actually help your webinar. By default, I say digital events, or not by default, but in my experience, digital events are some of the hardest things to promote, and largely because you're asking people to give you their most valuable asset. The thing that's most important to them, at least in terms of work, is their time. It's not like a news story where they can kind of pull it up and leave the tab open and hop back and read a paragraph here or there. It's not a video that they can pause and watch and come back to later. It is, you are asking them to join a meeting for usually at least an hour and give you their attention for that time of the day. So how can you word your event in a way that will make people want to do that? The first thing is keep your description short. If people go to a registration page and they see a whole lot of text, like a lot of things, that's just going to be an instant turn off. So we recommend 3 to 5 sentences, and emphasize what attendees will gain from attending live that they may not get from watching the recording or by not attending. So and this kind of goes in with the next bullet point of avoiding language that makes the event sound like a lecture. I see a lot of webinar summaries that are just like, come listen to us talk about this, or come hear us talk about this, or hear these people talk about this. And that doesn't really highlight why attendees should come listen. It doesn't like, okay, so they'll come listen and be lectured to for an hour, and then what? So really emphasize what they will gain, what they are getting out of from attending it. So it could be it could be something like learn how this tool can help you improve how you do this, or something like that. Something that really makes it sound like they will be able to improve their work, or it will be beneficial to them to give them your time and attention. Emphasize the new. Try to avoid language that makes it sound like you are rehashing old work. I get this a lot with webinars that are highlighting ongoing projects. Is I'll see things on the summary that'll be like, in this presentation, we're going to talk about updates to this project that we highlighted a year ago, and in that we talked about this. And it when you use language like that, it makes it just sound like you're presenting same information again, and you want to avoid that. You want to make it sound new and exciting, again, to emphasize what they'll gain from attending. And WOW recordings, we always make those available. Viewing data on webinar recordings is usually really low. So generally your recordings are not going to be well viewed. And part of that is I think a lot of people on webinar recordings are looking for specific information. They don't necessarily want to listen to the whole thing, so maybe they'll come look at the recording for a specific section or something, but in general, what viewing data on recordings is not necessarily appealing. Sorry. And then another thing that makes digital events difficult to promote is people often feel that they don't need to join live if they know the webinar will be recording. And that's often why you'll have your attendance numbers be quite a bit lower than your registrant numbers. Is people will register if they're interested, and then when it gets day of, they'll just have other things that they need to do or other ways that they want to spend their time that day. And if they know that they'll at least have the option to listen to later, there's not the incentive for them to join live. So that again, emphasize if you can in your promotional language and in your summary and description, emphasize what will be the benefit of joining live, how they can engage live in a way that they won't be able to just by listening to a recording. And Britton, a great comment here in the chat, engage with subject matter experts as they discuss. Yes, free-flowing conversation of ideas, and especially the subject matter experts, if you can engage them, oftentimes that brings a level of excitement that attendees pick up on. So Britton, that's a great suggestion there. So overall project management, we recommend beginning event planning for these no later than 6 weeks prior to the event. We recommend 8 more weeks if possible. I know this can be hard. I know clients a lot of times will come up to you and say like, hey, we want to run a webinar and we need to run it in 2 weeks. And if that's what it has to be, it has to be, but that with the time it takes to really do good promotion and develop the materials, it is for the sake of managing stress, we always recommend starting the process at least 8 weeks, if at the bare minimum 6. Be very clear with the client early on in the process, and this is something to do in the kickoff meeting, is the purpose of the digital event. Are you really just doing kind of like an information dump and just want to reach the largest audience possible? Or is this an event where you want to get more feedback engagement? You want there to be more open communication. Not only is that going to affect how you set up the webinar, but it's also going to affect how you determine success, how you report afterwards whether you had a successful digital event. So once you have it scheduled, once you've had that kickoff meeting and you've confirmed the date and title, we recommend promotionally sending out a save the date, get it on people's calendars just so that they know it's coming, and also send a calendar hold to all the panelists. Neither Zoom nor WebEx will automatically add a calendar hold for panelists. Obviously, within the office, you can schedule teams using Outlook, so you can the calendar hold is included there. But for Zoom or WebEx, there is the option to add the event to your calendar, but this is a link at the very bottom of the panelist invitation that says add to calendar. And I think in the entire history I've been running webinars, I've had maybe 2 panelists who actually knew that link was there and manually added it themselves. And so it's just easier for you to send a calendar hold for panelists so they have that blocked off. I will also say, and this is one thing to clarify with panelists, because I do get this a lot, do not include a join Zoom link in the calendar hold, especially for panelists. Each panelist is given their own unique Zoom link, and each registrant is also, and that's actually how Zoom tracks who does and does not join the webinar, is it tracks which of those links are used to join. So I did have one webinar where someone sent out their personal panelist Zoom link to all of the panelists, and I had all the panelists join under the name Jennifer. And we had to spend quite a bit of time having each person come on camera and manually change their names, and that also messed up the post-event attendance report. So do not include a Zoom join link in that calendar hold. Another thing to determine after you get the event scheduled, and even in that kickoff meeting, is determine the level of support required. Is this something that the client already has a presentation prepared and they just want you to accommodate this space, the Zoom meeting, or the space to present it? Or is this going to be more involved? Are they going to need graphics, help editing their presentation, NREL format, so on and so forth? And then promotional efforts. What do you have access to? Email mailing lists? Are there newsletters that you can get promo in? Social media? All of those things will affect the cost and time involved in these. So you want to talk through those things early on in the process. And also, if you are addressing, for the most part, international audiences, or if you are working on a project that appeals to non-English speaking audiences, are translation services needed? We do contract with translation services, so if you need that, we can reach out to Gentile or any of us, and we can point you in the right direction to getting those services added to your meeting. A couple tips for scheduling. If possible, is avoid Mondays and Fridays. And here I am scheduling a webinar on a Friday. Mondays, people, the case of Mondays, they're coming into the workday, they aren't fully mentally engaged yet. They kind of need the day to work into their work. And then Fridays, for the most part, people are already checked out. They're already ready to move on for the weekend. So if you want the best engagement and attention, Tuesday through Thursday. And then unless work is specifically targeted or focused on international audiences, a majority of who you work with or have on your webinar will be in the US. So we recommend scheduling between 10 a.m. or 2 p.m. So during kind of lunch hours, it's not too early on the West Coast, not too late on the East Coast. If you go earlier than that, you're kind of pushing the West Coast people to maybe wake up earlier or get involved in work earlier than they want to. If you go later than that, you're pushing into the dinner time on the East Coast. So those are, we've also seen data that registration and attendance during those times is better than outside those windows. The most effective, sorry, Isabel here. Isabel says, recommend avoiding Mondays in case you have laptop or tech issues over the weekend, given IT isn't available to help. Yes, very true. The most effective forms of promotion. For webinars, especially, as much as possible, you want to do targeted outreach, especially for the type of webinars we run. We are generally running webinars on pretty technical information. So most of the people who you're targeting, or most of the people you're reaching out to, are going to be people who are working in the same space. And as such, promoting these to the general public is not as effective as really honing in on the people involved in this work and the people who have the most to gain from learning about these. So some effective forms of promotion that we found: inclusion in newsletters. Most of the EERE tech offices have their own newsletters. And so especially if you have an EERE funded project, do what you can to get those listed in those communications. NREL newsletters, I think pretty much every tech area within NREL comms has a newsletter, so get them included in there. If a mailing list is available, or you can create one either by presenter contacts or things like that, targeted emails can be very effective. And then social media, we recommend doing this more within 2 weeks of the event. In fact, EERE, at least the last I heard, they will not run webinar promotion earlier than 2 weeks before the event. They've just, their social media data just shows that webinar promotion before that is not effective. It's too far out to really be relevant to audiences. So EERE, like I said, will not even post social media webinar promotion earlier than 2 weeks before the event. And LinkedIn is by far the most successful for webinar promotion. I know we're seeing LinkedIn is the most effective for all social media promotion these days. And again, that's largely because we're reaching out to the targeted audience, where it's networks that speakers and panelists and we have built with people who work in the same space. So LinkedIn is a very successful platform for engagement and outreach. Sorry. You want to make sure you get the event added to relevant pages online. Pretty much all NREL tech areas have an events page, so make sure they're included on there. Also EERE web pages. Anywhere you can get your event posted or make it visible is great. We also recommend using Bitly to create a customized link. The Bitly account, I believe, just recently, just within the last month or so, was made available office-wide. So now the whole office does have access to Bitly. Bitly, as part of their tracking data, actually provides you with in a graph form of when your link was created, or when it was clicked on and engaged with, so you can cross-reference that with your promotional efforts to really get a good idea of which of your promotional efforts were most effective in driving traffic to your event. So when you're getting closer to the event, within 2 to 3 weeks, you want to schedule a dry run or practice session for all speakers. That's a time to talk through run of show. So who's going to speak when, to what slides. You want to do a tech check, make sure everyone is familiar with the platform, see if there are any issues joining or sharing screen, and work through those at that point. And also just go over any final steps that need to be completed before you run the webinar. I always make this a very open time for the speakers and the presenters to do whatever they need to make them feel comfortable for the event. So sometimes this means I have speakers who are already very comfortable using Zoom or WebEx, and they really just want to use the time to run through their presentation, and that's great. Or maybe they feel comfortable with the presentation and are not as comfortable with the platform, and they want to spend more time playing with the interface and testing the Q&A and chat. That's great too. Our job is to really make sure these clients feel comfortable to present their work, that they feel like they don't have to worry about whether it's showing up okay, or if we don't want them to feel stressed. So anything we can do in this run of show to put them at ease, I am all for. In the last couple of weeks, you obviously want to finalize and send those promotional materials. There are templates available for like social media image cards or email outreach. We have templates for both MailChimp or Contact Monkey within Outlook. And if you would like if you would like to see any of those, please reach out, and happy to share them. And then we also recommend putting together a little outreach package or toolkit for your client and speakers that includes things like any graphics that have been created, including like a social media card, suggested social media language, email language, registration links, all that language, social media language, email language. I always encourage them to adjust as they see fit for their audiences, what they feel will appeal most to their contacts. By all means, give them freedom to do that. It's just a lot of times they don't have the time or energy to do that, and so providing them some base language can be very helpful, and it makes it easier for them to send along. You also want to confirm, run a show, and finalize all details. So again, just making sure you know who's going to talk through what slides and when, how you're going to manage the Q&A and when you're going to do that. And also what I always include is a document that I have on the side that includes any links that are on slides. Obviously, when you're screen sharing, people can't click on the links in the screen share. So I have that list of those links, and I insert them into the chat at the relevant points so that people can click on those links in when they are presented in the webinar. And I've also noticed that can be very effective for promoting not just web traffic, but also engagement for future events. So if you're working with a client who is running a webinar and they have another event coming up, include the registration link for that upcoming event in the chat of that webinar, because it's likely going to be a very similar audience. So great opportunity to do that. One other thing we recommend doing is having speakers generate a few stock questions in case attendees are quiet during Q&A segments. This happens all the time, that they present their information, you get to the end, you ask if there's any questions, and then there's just that awkward silence. If that happens, having those questions in stock can often lead to really great conversation. I've had a number of webinars where people are just thinking through the information, nothing's coming to mind, and then they hear, kind of going to Britton's point, they hear us as the moderators engaging with the clients and having that conversation, and that triggers thoughts or other questions that they have. So we always recommend having a few stock questions in the bank to use for those moments. Post-event, you've done all the pre-event stuff, you've gone through that, you had your webinar, it was wonderful and successful, and you had no technical issues, and no one's video stopped working or audio, and everything went perfectly. Um, things to provide post-event, final attendee and registration reports, and then the Q&A and chat transcripts. Those are available immediately after the webinar. You don't need to wait for them to be generated. One thing I will say about chat transcripts is by default, the one that's saved only includes chats that include the host. So if two panelists had a private chat, that will not show in the chat transcript that we generate as the facilitator. That said, anyone on a Zoom meeting has the ability to save the chat. They just open the chat box, click the three dots there, and click Save Chat. And that will save any chat that they were involved in. So if panelists are having kind of their own private chat and they want to save that, they can do that manually on their end. The recording, it takes Zoom some time after the event ends to generate the recording. There are a number of factors that play into that, including duration of the webinar, how many videos were on, how many different speakers, etc. I think the fastest I've seen for recording is about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Sometimes I've seen it take up to 6 to 8 hours for that recording to be available. It just really depends. If the event is going to be posted publicly, you do need a transcript. That's for web accessibility purposes. There's this page on the source that has all the info on how to order and get those transcription services. I will note that any of those transcripts that are posted online must be edited for NREL style prior to posting. And for this reason, during webinars, I advise people it will take, I usually say, about 2 to 3 weeks to get the webinar recording posted. And that's just because of the time it takes to order the transcript, get it back, and then depending on editor workload or how soon you can get that completed, sometimes it takes time. So I always just make sure people are aware that if that's the case, they won't necessarily have the recording available the night of or the day after the webinar. If your client likes, some people like to do that, some don't, is schedule a debrief call to go over the webinar and talk about what did or didn't work, especially for clients who have recurring webinars and kind of want to figure out what they can do better on future ones. Having a brief conversation afterwards to talk about this is a great way to come up with ideas of what you can do for next one or even plan better. And again, that's totally at the discretion of you and your client. Some like it, some like to do that, some don't. Some post-event metrics reporting. On average for NREL webinars, I usually say that this is on the low end, around 40% of registrants attend. For NREL webinars, I say it's usually between 40 to 60% of those who register actually attend the webinar. I looked it up, and nationally, or at least for general webinar usage, average attendance is around 30% of registrants. So it's it, if your client is at all concerned with, hey, we had like 200 registrants, why did only 70 people attend? That's actually what you expect. So that's just some base knowledge there. Look at Bitly data again to determine effective outreach. One point I will make is, at least with our Bitly account, it only provides the extended data for the past 60 days from the day you log in. So for example, if I were to log into Bitly now, I would only see that extended data going back to mid-October. You'll still see the overall data. So if it's beyond that 60 days, you can still see, hey, this link had 300 clicks, but if those clicks happened more than 60 days ago, you won't be able to see when. So if you have a bit.ly link and you want to track that data, definitely recommend doing that soon after the event so you don't get beyond that window. One other thing with metrics reporting, and this goes back to what I said earlier about having that conversation about what they want to get out of the webinar, is make it very clear and know that registration and attendance numbers might not tell the whole story. Again, some webinars, if you're looking at just an information dump and you want to get it out to as many people as possible, then yeah, you want to pay attention to those registration or attendance numbers. But on other webinars, maybe what you're looking for is more feedback and engagement and communication. And so in that case, maybe it's not about the number that attended, it's about how engaged those that did attend were. I've seen webinars that had 100, 150 people that had zero engagement, and then I've had webinars that were 20 people and we had to cut the conversation short because they were just really engaged and gave a lot of good feedback. So and I do have this conversation with clients often, is they'll say, oh, well, hey, we only got X number of people. And I'll say, well, yeah, but we also got a lot of questions from those people and they seemed really engaged in the presentation. So just again, be aware that numbers don't necessarily tell the whole story when it comes to webinars. And then final step is to schedule a follow-up email or communique to both attendees and registrants. You want to include a link to the posted recording and share where they can access that. Also, any other relevant data you want to include, a web page, fact sheet, anything like that. So after this, we're kind of wrapping up. I see a couple questions here. Do you recommend using source tracking feature in Zoom webinars? Absolutely. If you want to do that. This is not something I've done, but if that is data that your client is interested in, that absolutely. Where I can only speak for my team now, but we are looking at really integrating metrics reporting into everything we do. And that's definitely a great suggestion. That's definitely something I can pursue even on my own end, because yeah, understanding which channels drove the most registration, social, email, web, etc. That can be helpful. I haven't used Zoom, so I'm not sure how Zoom displays that information or how it tracks that information. Bitly does. Well, and now that I think about it, I'm not sure Bitly will know whether it came from social promotion or things like that. But I know Bitly. I don't think Bitly does. So Bitly just tracks link clicks and engagements, and then it tells you when those happen. So if you know, like if you see a lot of Bitly link clicks on December 12th, then you look and, oh, I posted a social media post about that on December 12th, then you can kind of deduce that that's where, or that was the effective promotion. Do you need a full transcripts for videos just posted to YouTube, or is it okay to just have captioning? You can have captioning if there is, maybe Deb, you know about this. I believe we have to pay for captioning anyway. And if you order a transcript, you can use that edited transcript for the caption. If anyone on the video team has other information on that.
Hi there, this is Deb. So let's see here. My understanding, and if this is what you're asking, I'm not really sure. Whatever is generated by Zoom, like the auto captioning, that's not good enough, is what I'm told, to be 508 compliant, so that you still need to send it out. So people will send videos with that Zoom caption, be like, can I use this? But what I'm told is no, it's just not, maybe at some point it'll be smart enough and it'll create a caption that's good enough for 508 compliance. But as of now, no. If that's what you're asking, Sarah.
Yeah, hi, Deb. So I think what I was asking was, Ryan mentioned having, going through the editing process and having a transcript that meets NREL style. But I was wondering if that was necessary, if we had already ordered a captioning transcript and that was already fed into the YouTube and it was all synced up, if we also needed a transcript beyond that. like posted to the web or anything like that?
So part of why we say must be edited for NREL style is especially a lot of these webinars may have acronyms or technical terms that may not be familiar to the captioning service that are familiar to our editors, and our editors will be more familiar with that and can make sure those are accurate. And also any video posted on the NREL webpage does need a text version. And so if you have that caption already ordered and edited as per NREL web standards and NREL terminology, you can use that caption to inform the text version that is posted on the website.
I gotcha. Cool. Thank you.
Yep. Just being mindful of time, I got a couple more slides here, and then if we have the time, I'll address these couple questions here. Some other resources, Insight Communications has a list of a lot of what I went over today, including information on the platforms, cost estimates for standard events, and information on posting these recordings. Again, that's available on Insight Communications. You can join the web conferencing team on Microsoft Teams. There's a resourcing channel there, so if you want information on best practices or tools or things like that, that's available. That's also a good place to seek help if you have a webinar that you cannot support that you need coverage on. The working group has also developed several best practices documents and standard housekeeping slides. Feel free to reach out to those if you'd like copies of those templates or documents. And also, as I mentioned earlier, if you are interested in doing a more hands-on in-depth training, so actually going in and exploring the settings and practicing, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to schedule a time either with you or someone else on our team. Couple of informational things about our working group activities. We are always looking for more members. It's such an common and integral part of the work we do here, and so we are always looking for new input on how we can improve digital events at NREL. So if this is something you're passionate about or want to be involved in, please join us. Next up, sometime in Q2, I think we're looking late February or early March, we're going to do an on-campus hands-on hybrid events training. So we'll do some overview on how to project manage hybrid events, but most of that time will be actually using the equipment in the conference rooms, joining meetings, practicing screen shares, mics, cameras, all that. And then also throughout the year, dates and times to be determined, but we're going to be hosting some open sessions, kind of just some open office hours where you can come in and either one or several members of the working group will be on there to just answer any questions or talk through any of your experiences and just have kind of an open time to have those conversations. We will send out invites to those as they are determined. And that is all for me. Thank you again for joining. I know I just dumped a lot of information on you, so really appreciate it. Got a couple minutes here. Isabel, what email tool do most teams use to send wrap-up email with the recording and everything? And to your point, yes, MailChimp has opt-in restrictions. So if this is a team that you do already have a MailChimp list that has opted into this, then you can use that. Generally, what I do is our web team can create an email template on the source that you can save as an HTML and import into Outlook. And then you can send that using Outlook either. And if you want tracking on that, you can use Contact Monkey. We can get a list of people in the office who have Contact Monkey accounts, and that will still allow you to track data on Outlook. But even without Contact Monkey, there is information on the source that I can find and share that tells you how to import an HTML template into Outlook and just send a follow-up email via Outlook. Any other questions? Sherry.
Yeah, I was wondering, do you have any suggestions on like how to keep a presentation or webinar interesting, like ways to, further engage people or like interactive things that you can do so they're not just sitting there and like listening to you the whole time? Just, any suggestions?
that is always tough, and I don't have a guaranteed answer for that. I know a lot of times people say like, hey, integrate more polls into your webinar, and I've done that before, and then one person answers the poll.
Oh.
The best you can do is just, as much as possible, try to understand your audience. So a lot of times I'll have clients who say, hey, or will advise clients to keep it very high level, don't get way too technical or in the weeds. But even that, I've been on some webinars where the audience was more technically minded and actually really enjoyed the more technical side of things and were really engaged with that. So I wish I had some clear answer of this is an absolutely effective way to increase engagement. Especially if it's going to be a longer webinar, so more than 45 minutes or an hour, have a break or two in there. I think, and again, here I am running an hour-long webinar with no breaks, but if you have people just sitting there too long, just listening and listening, they're going to lose interest, they're going to disengage. So, and even integrating those breaks into your presentation. So if you have, you know, a whole bunch of slides without any sort of topic change or something, consider points where you can kind of take a breather and give people a rest.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Jim, a intro 101 level webinar practice or IT learning group. If there's a need for that, I mean, maybe I know that's something the web conferencing working group can do. If you want to reach, if there are people interested in that sort of actual practice or IT learning, we would be happy to coordinate those. I don't know that there's been enough interest office-wide to have a whole group running just those, but that is certainly something the web conferencing working group can help you with.
Thanks, Ryan. Nice work. Thank you.
Thank you all. And again, please feel free to reach out to the web conferencing working group with any other questions. This recording we will get posted to Insight Communications for reference along with the slides. And if there are no other questions, I will say happy Friday. And if I don't talk to you, enjoy your holidays.
Thanks, Ryan. That was awesome.